World Suicide Prevention Day tries to create awareness about suicide prevention and how to help people fight suicidal thoughts. Observed on the 10th of September every year, the day is organized by the International Association for Suicide Prevention. It is an opportunity to raise awareness all across the world that suicide can be prevented. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has no doubt affected mental health, primarily because staying at home, low physical activity, less socializing and unexpected changes in the way everything works have made it important to highlight suicide prevention. Now, as Nigeria joins other countries in marking this year's World Suicide Prevention Day, reports indicate that no fewer than 264 suicide cases were recorded in the country within the last 4 years. Now, this figure excludes numerous suicide cases that have not been reported by the media. The theme of this year's World Suicide Prevention Day is working together to prevent suicide. The majority of suicides worldwide are related to various mental illnesses. Among those are depression, substance abuse, schizophrenia, and psychosis, which constitute the most relevant risk factors. There are also issues relating to anxiety, personality, eating, and trauma-related disorders, while organic mental disorders significantly add to unnatural causes of death compared to the general population. There is sometimes the tendency to trivialize suicide and attempted suicide. The temptation of being judgmental, stereotypical, hostile, and negative on this issue is very high, which inevitably leads to stigmatization. Issues around suicide and how best to prevent it form the basis of this edition of the program. Welcome to Nigeria Today. I am Dennis Adignoye. All right, joining me to speak on the issue of suicide prevention in Nigeria is Chinyerugo Udensi. She is a clinical psychologist and a member of the NEEM Foundation. You're very welcome to Nigeria Today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and also joining us via Zoom from Ibadan is Dr. Jibril Abdul Malik, a consultant psychiatrist and founder Asido Foundation. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Good evening, our viewers at home.
All right. Let me start with our guest in the studio, Dr. or should I say Chinyerugo Udensi, clinical psychologist. Suicide represents a major societal and health challenge. What can you tell us in regards to statistics in Nigeria when it comes to suicide cases?
Yeah. One of the challenges we have when it comes to statistics in Nigeria is we pretty much don't really have it. A lot of the research that you see would be referring to the WHO research that was done a few years ago, and it places Nigeria as the 7th highest in Africa. So we don't actually have quite a significant or a well-grounded research that gives us numbers as to the people that are, committing suicide. But we know that every day, either via media or via any form of communication, there are people who are taking their lives. And one person taking their life is just one too many. Yeah. Exactly.
Absolutely. In your experience, what kind of issues will somebody have to be facing in their lives to give them the thought that they feel that there's no other way out, that I need to end my life?
So I like to look at them as risk factors, because we know that there really isn't any cause and effect when it comes to suicide, and what causes people are, is not directly related. There are lots of risk factors. The first one we can look at is a history of suicide in the family. Sometimes it predisposes the person within that family to want to take their life because they feel perhaps that that's the way out of their problem. A history of attempted suicide, previous attempted committed suicide can be a risk factor. A history of a mental health challenge is a risk factor. It's not necessarily that everybody with a mental health challenge will have a suicidal ideation or suicidal attempt, but that usually can be a risk factor. Significant loss. Loss of job, loss of a loved one, loss of a family member or friend, anything, any significant loss in someone's life can actually predispose them to that. Traumatic events, traumatic experiences, things that shake a person's world and they're unable to manage it can actually predispose them to committing suicide. If I had to add a little bit to it to the better understanding of what it is, suicide is not necessarily about I want to die. You know, that's not what it is. It's more about trying to end a pain, trying to end something that's caused, trying to end it because you feel like you can't solve it or you feel like there's no end to the problem. So if we have to look at it from that aspect and not just I want to die, then we realize that anything that causes somebody such significant pressure or pain and they don't find a way out of it, the person could be at risk if they are not offered the right support.
Absolutely. All right, let me bring in our guest via Zoom, Dr. Jibril Abdul Malik, consultant psychiatrist. Dr. Jibril, suicide is a major health challenge nationally and globally. In your view, what is the situation in Nigeria, and is this issue of suicide being taken seriously enough in this country?
Right. Thank you very much. And I want to say that it's a big problem globally as well as in Nigeria, and it certainly is not being taken seriously enough in our country. But before I proceed, let me quickly mention that people often say that it's not in our culture. It's a Western kind of problem, and that for us in Nigeria, suicide is a strange thing that is new. But I want to dispute that based on the fact that our cultural history, I mean, in Yoruba mythology, it is reported that Sango, the god of thunder, eventually ended his life via suicide. And in the popular book Things Fall Apart, written by Chinua Achebe, the major protagonist in the book, Okonkwo, eventually also ended up taking his own life via suicide as a means of escaping the public humiliation. So if these concepts are completely strange to our culture, we will not find them depicted in our history, in our mythology. So they are not strange things happening in our society. It's always been there. It's a feature of every society. But maybe because of more social media reporting now, we are more aware, we are more sensitized to it. But with respect to activities of recognizing that it's a public health emergency, I think we are still not there yet. And that's why I'm happy that NTA and other media practitioners are beginning to use this opportunity to focus attention on the problem so that hopefully we'll begin to take it seriously and be proactive in addressing it in our society.
Sure, Dr. Jibril, apart from the cultural beliefs among Nigerians regarding suicide, what other issues would you say have caused this issue to be not so much on the front burner? And how would you recommend that these issues be addressed and challenged?
Right. Thank you very much. I think some of the challenges we have is that in our society generally, there's a lot of ignorance, shame, misconceptions, as well as stigma associated with everything mental health or mental illness related. And as my colleague, Ms. Udensi, had already mentioned earlier, we know that a major risk factor for suicide is mental health, mental illness. And in as high as 80 to 90% in some reports, there will be a background mental illness in the picture, commonly depression. And for us, because of our cultural disposition, our religious approach to issues, and the shame and lack of understanding, clarity about mental illness, people tend to think that, oh, if you are having a mental health problem, is because your faith is not strong enough, is because it's a spiritual attack from enemies, and so we tend to hide it. So even the affected families are embarrassed and they are ashamed and they don't want to come up openly to admit that they have someone suffering from this problem. And a problem that you are hiding and burying, how do you get the help you need for it? So these are some of the problems that we have in our society that makes it difficult for us to have effective suicide prevention. And that is what the World Suicide Prevention Day is aiming to achieve, to promote awareness so that we stop the unnecessary loss of precious human lives. It is preventable. That's why there's a World Suicide Prevention Day. But you can't intervene for a problem that people are hiding and afraid to come out publicly to admit they have. And that's why we have a long way to go in our society, especially with awareness creation, removing the shame, removing the stigma associated with mental health problems, including suicide and suicidal behaviors.
All right, so if you just hang on there with us, we'll come back to you shortly. This issue of stigmatization is certainly no doubt a clog in the wheel of the progress of making this issue of suicide, bring it to the forefront of national consciousness. So what's your take on how to break down this cog of stigmatization?
It's quite unfortunate that the stigmatization on all mental health challenges, suicide is quite a very, very serious one, like we've heard from Dr. Abdulmalik. What stigma does is that it prevents people from receiving the help that they need, and it prevents them from stepping out and owning up to taking the support that they need. What we can do is what we're doing now, actually raising awareness, talking about it, letting people know that you can prevent suicide, letting families know that when your loved ones are suicidal and they approach you, that there's something that you can do about it. So we're taking the fear away from it, because if you don't know about something, sometimes the fear keeps you from addressing it. So we're taking the fear away and we're giving you the knowledge to say this is what it is, and when you know it for what it is, you will address it for what it actually is.
Sure.
So talking about it, raising awareness, that's one way we can educate people and try and remove the stigma.
Yeah, and this brings us very nicely onto our theme for this year, working together to prevent suicide. How can society truly come together and work together in terms of preventing cases of suicide, or certainly reducing them to the barest minimum?
Yeah. I'm very glad that they had this theme for this year, because truth be told, it's a public health challenge that requires all hands on deck.
Yeah.
From any level that you can think about, everybody needs to come on board and needs to support, from the person who is having a suicidal ideation, seeking help, and from loved ones and family coming together to help the people who actually having these suicidal thoughts. Everybody needs to come together. Everybody has a role to play. It may not be you, but the knowledge you have, the skills you have can go a long way to helping the other person, helping the person around you. So all hands on deck. We all have to come together, and there's so many things that we can do to help people who are having suicidal thoughts.
Now, does suicide does it discriminate, or is there any group of persons or categories of people that are more prone to suicidal thoughts and eventually going ahead and taking their lives?
There's no discrimination. It could be anybody. It could literally be anybody. It's not discriminating against age, gender, nothing. It could just be anybody. I know, however, there's research that says that men use more lethal forms in comparison to women, and there just a few little bits of differences in there. But however, there really isn't any discrimination when it comes to suicidal behaviors.
All right. When we come back from our break, we'll focus on symptoms and kind of issues to look out for to prevent suicide. You are watching Nigeria Today, and we are focusing on World Suicide Prevention Day. We'll take a break now and get the views on from people on the streets on suicide prevention. Let's hear from Hakeem Dairo in this Vox Pop.
Commit suicide, he will kill himself because of he will not have any financial problem and nobody to assist him.
Say because people they don't have work to do, and so some people, most of them, they don't get home training. The way people can commit suicide, I don't think that man is well, maybe has brain problem
because of the hardship. Sometimes when they try to do one or two things and things seems to be very difficult for them and they are not getting it the way they want it, and at the end of the day, they might probably just want to commit suicide, being it that they are not getting really what they want.
When people don't have hope again, they think to end their lives. So the most reason why many people commit suicide is lack of hope. But if anybody can see hope, no matter what is happening in your present time, if you can see hope, there's no need to kill yourself.
Especially in the present day, you see hardship here and there. People trying to make ends meet, but couldn't. Maybe they just take their life as a means to end it. At least both religion, Christianity and Islam, both condemn it. So I personally will advise that no matter the situation in life, you should just don't give up.
In as much as there is God, there is hope. So they should have hope and believe in God.
All right, some views of some Nigerians there on the issue of suicide and suicide prevention. Welcome back to the program. If you are just joining us, we are discussing World Suicide Prevention Day. Our guests are Chinyerugo Udensi, clinical psychologist and member of the NEEM Foundation, as well as via Zoom, Dr. Jibril Abdul Malik, consultant psychiatrist and founder at CIDO Foundation. Dr. Jibril, let me come back to you now. You heard some of the comments from members of the public there. Is it really as simple as where there is hope, there is no need to have these suicidal tendencies, or does it go much deeper than that?
Right. Thank you very much. I mean, it was very eye-opening that some of them actually got their finger right with respect to the fact that it's a complete loss of hope for a better tomorrow that sometimes pushes people to that point. Because don't forget, the majority of those who attempt or end up ending their life via suicide have background depression. And depression is a mood disorder where there's extreme feelings of sadness, overwhelming emotional pain and anguish, which Ms. Udensi had also referred to earlier. And the most important thing there is that they seek an escape route and they lose hope in the fact that things can get better. And that is a critical factor in leading to suicidal behavior when they no longer have hope. So, and some of the members of the public who commented actually identified this. So what we find in psychological autopsy, trying to rewrite the emotions and the moods of individuals who end up attempting suicide or ending their life via suicide, is that most of them describe extreme feelings of loneliness, that they feel nobody understands them, nobody is there for them, and that is what pushes them to the brink of thinking nobody is going to miss me, the world will be better off without me, and that kind of things. And that's a critical point for intervention for each of every one of us. Remember, the theme for this year is everyone has a role to play. So you don't have to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist to play a role in suicide prevention. All you need is to have a caring heart and a listening ear, and to just show attention and care. Start with your immediate circle of influence, your family members. Pay attention to them. If you've not seen them for a while, check on them, ask them how they are doing, and let them know that you care for them. Just simply doing things like this go a long way in helping individuals who feel very lonely, who feel very abandoned, to begin to think that, oh, at least there is one person who cares about me.
Are there any specific symptoms or attributes that one can look out for in someone who is potentially suicidal, and subsequently being able to get them the required help as needed?
Oh, yes. I mean, what you tend to see is that the individual becomes extremely sad and gloomy and unhappy, miserable, or they may begin to make statements that make you wonder, like, oh, if when I'm no longer here, or you will be better off without me. These kind of statements that should give you pause, right, to consider, why are you talking this way, right? And then individuals who have suffered significant loss, either loss of a very close loved ones or significant financial or major loss or bereavement, and those who have attempted suicide in the past, those who have impulsive behavior, that we know that they don't usually think things through most of the time. They're usually very impulsive. These are symptoms or signs that you can use to predict that this individual may be at high risk of attempting suicide. When they begin to express this kind of statements, and you begin to see the feelings of depression, some of them may also become socially withdrawn and isolated. And that's why, again, we have to take the extra step of going to look for them, check on them, and see what's happening with them.
Let me come back to our clinical psychologist in the studio, Chinyerugo. In view of all that Dr. Jibril has said, from a professional standpoint, what kind of treatment is available out there for those who are, let's say, in the extreme stages of suicidal tendencies, and how do you actually bring them out of that thought process?
So when somebody has gone to a part where they are suicidal and it's your loved one, I think the first step that what an everyday person can do before you even get to a part of looking for a mental health practitioner, the everyday person, you just want to ask them questions and allow them to talk and listen to them. You know, when you're talking to them, you're not trying to argue with them. You're not trying to get into some form of discussion or trying to preach to them. You just want to listen to them, and you want to make them feel like they're being heard. And in doing that, you also want to find out things like, you know, how long have you been thinking about this? You know, do you have plans? What plans do you have? This also gives you an idea of the severity of where the person's mind is at, because you could be talking to somebody and their mind has gone to a place that's quite severe and you don't know. So asking them these questions gives you an understanding of what's going on, and it's very important for you to take it serious. You know, take it very, even if they're smiling and they're saying these things to you, take it serious and listen to them, because there's a lot more that you can hear when you listen to someone actively. Then refer them to a mental health practitioner. There are lots of healthcare hotlines available. Once you put it on the Google search, you can find like a hotline available that the person can call or speak to, and those are like immediate support that the person can get till they're at least able to calm them down a little bit more, or let's say, for lack of better words, stabilize them a little bit. And then once they be stable, it's very, very important to actually refer them to a mental health practitioner. You want to stay with them also till they're a bit more enhanced, where they can get some form of 2-to-1 or one-on-one, you know, hands-on. Someone has to be there with them. You don't have to leave them till they're a bit able to begin to now start the process of talking to a psychologist or talking to a psychiatrist about what's going on in their minds. All right. Okay. Dr. Jibril, for the most part of this year, we've been in the grip of COVID-19, this pandemic that is not going away anytime soon. How has this dynamic affected, positively or otherwise, the issue of suicide generally around the world and in Nigeria specifically?
Right. Very much. Part of the problems we have with Nigeria is the paucity of data and the very poor documentation habits we have, which Ms. Studensi referred to at the beginning of this program. So while we do not have reliable figures as to suicide rates pre-COVID and during COVID in Nigeria, what we know globally is that mental health problems have increased, suicide rates have increased, including among health professionals. I mean, in New York, in Russia, in South Africa, in several countries, there have been reports of healthcare practitioners, frontline healthcare workers looking after COVID-19 patients who themselves have become so emotionally distraught that they've actually ended their own lives. So we know that the intense emotional pressure of COVID-19 pandemic, the uncertainty, the feeling of hopelessness and helplessness, because nobody can say for sure when this will end, and the impact it has had in terms of finances, in terms of day-to-day normal life as we used to know it, has been immense. In terms of that, has really stretched our resilience, our coping strategies. So we know that it has had a lot of negative mental health impact. We also know that it has caused a spike in suicide rates globally, but unfortunately, we cannot give specifics for the rates in Nigeria. But what we will keep saying is that considering that there's a lot of mental health problems at the back pushing or leading towards suicidal behavior. Let us in Nigeria, in our society, let us encourage open conversations. Let us do away with shame and stigma so that those who have mental health problems or are going through a lot of emotional distress can seek the help they need, get better, and get back to normal productive living. And I just want to quickly say this before I stop here, that the Asido Foundation is doing a campaign, Unashamed 2020 campaign, on our website, and the idea is that it's a new decade of the 2020s. Let it be a new chapter in our nation's history where there is more open conversations around mental health, no more shame, no more stigma, so that people can get the help they need. I think this is what we really need to do, and I'm happy that the media is playing an active role in also putting this on the front burner.
Absolutely, Dr. Jibril Abdulmalik, consultant psychiatrist and founder Asido Foundation. Thanks for those comments, and we certainly hope that they will be taken on board and things will improve significantly when it comes to suicide prevention. Thanks for your thoughts and insights and expertise. And thanks to you, Chinyerugo Udensi, clinical psychologist. Thanks for your expertise and insights.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks to you for watching Nigeria Today on this edition. YouTube.com/NTA News 24 Hub is where you can watch this edition or any others. I am Dennis at Dignoye. We'll be back tomorrow for another fresh edition. Good evening.